Good afternoon, students. And so today I want to go over more about science fiction. Science fiction is a wonderful genre and so much fun. As you could tell, I am a science fiction Trekkie. And so today I'm going to go over Hispanic science fiction. And so Hispanic science fiction in the book Latin, let's see if this works, Latin X. And so as promised, I'm going to go over the different stories, my favorite stories in Latin American science fiction. So I will share my screen so that you could see what I see. So let's go to this one. And so, Latin X, Rising by Matthew David Goodwin, an anthology of Latin X science fiction and fantasy. Latin X science fiction is a growing genre that explores the intersection of science fiction and Latin X culture. These stories often feature characters and settings that are rooted in Latin X experiences, and they explore themes of identity, community, and belonging. One of the most important themes in Latin X science fiction is the exploration of identity. Many of these stories feature characters who are struggling to define themselves in a world that often tries to define them for them. These characters are often immigrants, people of color, or members of other marginalized groups, and they must find ways to assert their own identities in a world that often tries to erase them. Another important theme in Latin X science fiction is the exploration of community. Many of these stories feature characters who find strength and support in their communities. These communities can be found in the real world, such as immigrant communities or Latin X neighborhoods, or they can be found in the fictional worlds of these stories. In either case, these communities provide a sense of belonging and support for the characters, and they help them to navigate the challenges of their lives. Finally, Latinx science fiction often explores the theme of belonging. Many of these stories feature characters who are trying to find a place where they belong. These characters may be immigrants, people of color, or other marginalized groups. And so these stories explain the challenges of trying to find a place, feeling accepted, feeling valued, finding a place to belong. And they also offer hope that such a place can be found. Latin X science fiction is a vibrant and growing genre that is making a significant contribution to the field of science fiction. These stories are important because they offer new perspectives on the world, and they help to expand the definition of what science fiction can be. They are also important because they provide a voice for Latin X people and their experiences. So some of the stories I really liked from Latin X. The first one are Sin Embargo by Sabrina Vulias, Accursed Lineage by Dana Chaviano, Coconuts in Space by Adal, Flying Under the Texas Radar by Ernest Hogan, Room for Rent by Richie Narvaez, Caridad by Alex Hernandez, and Entanglement by Carlos Hernandez, and The Drain by Alejandra Sanchez. So Coconuts in Space by Adal. So let's do that one first. So Coconuts in Space by Adal was simply a bunch of images. And images, I think it was, they call it, anyway, it's a bunch of images of Puerto Rican astronauts landing on the moon. And so instead of having a white astronaut landing on the moon, you have Puerto Rican astronauts landing on the moon, and it has no text, and it's just the whole story is told in pictures. So that's that story, and then another one, and I will share my screen. Another story, Sin Embargo, is about a little boy named Ronaldo from Guatemala. So in this story, Ronaldo is about 5 or 6 years old, and then a shooting takes place all the bullets are flying, and everybody dies. The entire family is wiped out, except for the little boy. And so the little boy has to hide under a bunch of corpses or dead bodies in order to survive. So he has to play dead so that the shooters don't notice him. And so in order to survive, Ronaldo hides underneath a pile of corpses to play dead until the shooters leave. Meanwhile, his sister in the US is desperately looking for Ronaldo. It actually takes Mariajo many decades for her to find her brother. And so getting back to the boy, as the boy lies waiting underneath the corpses, a vulture takes pity on the boy because the vulture had been eating the dead bodies. And so this vulture turns herself into a human. In other words, she turns herself into his dead sister, Mariajo, and then migrates to the U.S. And then once she gets to the U.S., Mariajo goes to an immigrant center and tries to find Ronaldo by looking through a lot of ancestry files and doing a lot of library work with the assistance of an American who works at the immigration center. And then she manages to find Ronaldo after many, many years. By this time, Ronaldo is like 40. And they talk on Zoom. And Ronaldo is so relieved to find out that his sister, Mariajo, is alive. Then later on, the Mariajo turns back into a vulture. And it's the librarian who had to figure it all out, to figure out what happened, because Mariajo used to visit the immigration center every week. And so the immigration caseworker becomes worried because Mariajo stopped coming into the immigration center. Then the immigration person has to keep looking, and then she finds out, and then this is of course the science fiction part, is the part where Mariajo had turned back into a vulture, and her whole purpose was to tell Ronaldo that not all of his family is dead and to give him hope to emigrate to the United States. So that's Sin Embargo by Sabrina Vurvolias. And then Accursed Lineage is another one by Anna Shaviano. So at the outset of the story, a couple of children watches their neighbor from their attic window. They see that their white neighbor, an old woman, and she's moving a trunk. And then she's opening the trunk. And the children can't see what's inside the trunk. And so they think that maybe she's burying a body, or maybe she killed her husband, or maybe they buried the husband in the backyard. So all kinds of fantastic stories go through the children's mind. And suddenly, the parents call the children down to dinner. And the children go downstairs, and then the reader does not find out that the children, that this whole family are vampires until the family starts eating blood soup. Now the family doesn't go around eating live people. They actually get the blood from the blood supply because from the hospital. So they're drinking the blood, and that's how the reader finds out that we're talking about a vampire family who still lives and goes to work. Then we switch perspective to the neighbor. So the white lady is looking out her window, and she notices that the empty house still has life in it, and she wonders, do those people know they're dead? Because the family that used to live in that empty house was murdered. And so basically in this story, you have two neighbors who don't trust each other, and they fear each other simply because they don't hang out with each other. And so each neighbor fears the other. And so this story symbolizes how in multi-ethnic neighborhoods, people of different nationalities fear each other. And then they come up with all kinds of stereotypes and stories to feed that fear. And so the family, so it's basically, this story talks about the fear of the other. So that's obviously the science fiction element of it is the vampire family. Flying Under the Radar, Texas Radar with Paco and the Freetails by Ernest Hogan. And so in this story, Paco and the Freetails, they're actually a band, and they play in this cosmic, like a bar. And so all kinds of aliens and all kinds of people. Think Star Wars. At the beginning of Star Wars, you had a bar with all of these aliens of all these different planets hanging out in this bar. And this is in the future, like hundreds of years from now, Texas. And so then, for some reason, the police descend onto the bar, and then the police deport Paco and the Freetails from Texas. And Paco is given the choice of either going to jail or going to work in Mars, being deported to Mars. So Paco chooses to go to Mars. And so just as Paco leaves the Earth, and he's settling down in Mars, but he's really pissed off because he misses his girlfriend, he misses his family in Texas. And then shortly after, he finds out that Texas blows up because of a nuclear bomb. And at first, Paco is pissed that he is being sent to Mars and being deported. But then later, Paco is relieved that he's on Mars. He gets to live, and then everybody, all the police that had deported him, they've all been vaporized by the nuclear bomb. And so this story struck me as ironic, that here the victim gets to be the victor. So and I think that this is somewhat very tongue-in-cheek kind of humor, very, 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 very dry. So that's Flying Under the Radar with Paco and the Freetails by Ernest Hogan. Room for Rent by Richie Narvaez. Now I think that here you have, I think this story talks about gentrification, where poorer residents are forced out of their homes because condos are being built in the neighborhood, and then the poorer residents have nowhere to go and then are eaten by the rich, as it were. So in this story, Hulk, she's a pregnant space alien, and then the space alien is about to give birth. And so as she goes to rent a room in the poor section of town, and then the landlord says, well, the only caveat is that the room for rent has a lot of human vermin in it. You're going to have to exterminate the human bugs inside your apartment. I've tried to exterminate them, but no matter what I do, the human bugs are able to hide inside the flooring of the apartment, and I've not been able to get rid of them. And so, do you still want the apartment? Says the landlord. And then the alien lady is bursting at the seams with her baby, saying, I'll take anything at this point, 'cause I'm about to give birth. So the alien lady goes to the room. She rents the room, and at first she feels sorry for the human family, because you have a poor father, you have the children, and she's actually smitten by the human children who look so innocent and so poor, and it's that innocence that keeps her from exterminating the humans right away. So then the adult playing the victim says, yeah, we've always been the victim throughout human history. We've always been the victim of some kind of oppression. And we've never had any war in human history. So unfortunately, if the human father had told the truth, I bet he'd still be alive. But instead, he lies and lies and lies. Later, the alien lady finds out that the human had been lying, that their whole human history is filled with violence and war. So therefore, she decides that these human vermin are really vermin and not worthy to stay alive. So after she gives birth, she instructs her babies to eat the humans. However, after they eat the humans, they're still able to remember both the good and the bad, so that way they won't forget that the humans actually exist. And so the alien lady and her children says that the humans were eaten because they have to understand their place in the universe. So in my opinion, this talks about gentrification, where rich people move into a poor neighborhood. So let's say the poor neighborhood are a bunch of Hispanics who are kicked out of their apartments, then they have nowhere to go, and then the Hispanics have to know their place in the universe. So in this case, the humans represent, or something like that. All I know is that it makes the people who are rich, makes them look bad because they are the ones who move into the poorer neighborhoods and they eat those that are oppressed. Something like that. So that's, for me, the symbolism in Room for Rent. And obviously, the science fiction element is the pregnant alien. Entanglement. So Karen and Jesus have an affair. So Karen is a white married lady whose husband Chase is in Iraq. She gets lonely, and without telling Jesus that she doesn't tell Jesus that she's married. So they have this affair. And then Jesus is a handsome Hispanic American who speaks no Spanish, and he even has a white ex-wife. And he has a PhD from a white university. So he's very, very Americanized. And so in a way, Karen represents a white racist lady because she only likes Jesus because he looks exotic. So this brings up the whole exoticism and how, people who are of color are just exotic, like having an exotic pet, that sort of thing. So they both fall in love, and Jesus is aware that was one of Karen's, and also the name Karen, I'm not sure if that was also the symbolism to something else. Anyway, so Karen likes Jesus because he looks Hispanic and has just enough Hispanic heritage with his dark skin, yet Jesus is Americanized enough for her white taste, which Jesus knows is kind of racist. Then the husband, Chase, comes back from Iraq, but he's lost both his legs and is very depressed to the point of being suicidal. And Jesus is a scientist, and he works with a machine that looks at different dimensions, kind of like a metaverse machine. And so it's called the aggregator. And so out of love for Karen, Jesus allows Chase to enter other dimensions of other Chases. And these other dimensions are other dimensions of Chase that did not go to Iraq, that did not go into the military. So these other versions of Chase have both their legs. So as long as Chase is inside the aggregator, he can then feel the legs of the other Chases in the other dimensions. And this makes the Chase without the legs very happy. He gets to look forward to always living other people's lives. So let's say you want to jump out and go on a parachute ride, or you want to make love with your wife. You could do it with your legs with the other Jesus. So obviously the other Chases, and obviously the other Chases not only can have sex with their wives, they can have children too. It's at this point that Chase wants a baby, and so he knows that that's something he cannot do without his legs. So he decides to have Karen and Jesus get together to have a surrogate baby. But remember, Chase is unaware that Jesus and Karen had an affair. As far as Chase is concerned, Karen had always been chaste and faithful to her husband. And therefore, as a favor to Chase, she's having sex with Jesus to have the surrogate baby. And so in the end, it's a happy ending where all three of them are parents to baby Jesus. And you don't find out that the baby is Jesus's until the very last sentence. So this story to me totally represents the total assimilation of a Hispanic into white America, right to the point of no Spanish, you have a white wife, even with a white husband, and so on and so forth. And the husband has his legs cut off, so it's the white male that's emasculated, and it's the Hispanic male that's elevated. So that's the irony. So this story is Entanglement by Carlos Hernandez. So this was a pretty cool story. I kind of like the part with the metaverse where Chase can then go and feel the legs of the other Chases. I think the whole idea of the metaverse is so fascinating. And then the last one, The Drain by Alejandra Sanchez. And so the main character is a woman named Anahita. And so every time Anahita takes a bath or a shower, this black phlegm comes out of her drain. And so she's like so disgusted by the, black phlegm and the black stuff. She tries to call a plumber, but the plumber is busy. And then she tries to get her boyfriend to fix it, but he's abusive. After a while, she just gives up on the whole idea of trying to fix her drain. And so one day, and she gets no respect from her job and from her boyfriend, and so on. And the only thing that takes away her angst is soaking in the tub, and then the water washes away all her worries. So one day she decides, that she could hear the black phlegm calling out to her. And so she decides to join the black phlegm, become black, one with the water, one with nature. And once she and then she transforms magically into a beautiful black sea animal goddess. She realizes that she's a goddess, that she's loved and respected. And so this to me is an example of magic realism. So in the beginning of the introduction of the book, the author did say that one or two of the stories does have the magic realism, but most of the stories do not. And so what's great about Latin and Latinx and Hispanic science fiction is that it addresses the issues facing the Latin American society while still adding a science fiction element to it. And so you've got the element of, like I mentioned in my previous video, careidad, and where the main character has to decide whether she wants to be a robot or not. Or you've got the sense of belonging and not belonging, and then the main character decides to just be one with her black phlegm, and then she becomes a black sea goddess. And then another one in which the two houses, one is a vampire house and one is a white house, and then they fear each other, and therefore that represents the fear between ethnic, the white community versus the Korean community versus the Hispanic community. And so in some places in the city, you could have a street divided where half the street is Hispanic, the houses are all Hispanic, and then the other half of the street, the houses are all Korean, and nobody ever crosses the street to hang out with each other. So I think that story represents the fear of the other. And then another story deals with deportation and the irony of, the anger that person feels at being deported. And yet another one. So these stories all touch on many different issues that touch upon Hispanic Americans. And so that's what makes American science fiction so rich, because each of the different ethnic groups writes using science fiction tropes and then touches upon the social issues that affects that community. So in many ways, science fiction is like an allegory. It's like an allegory of the social issues that affects those that are written about. So in my next science fiction video, I'm going to talk about African American science fiction and the issues there. And in particular, I'm going to talk about the author Octavia Butler. I truly, really loved her books, Kindred and Dawn and Xenogenesis. Beautiful books. And they talk about a lot of issues, and they're science fiction, and they talk about a lot of issues that face the African American science fiction or African American society. So that's what my next video will be about. So hopefully you'll have time to join me. And I'm making these science fiction videos to motivate my students to do more reading, because I think that the more you read, the better you write. So email me if you have any questions. So I will end this video, and I hope you all have, let's see, that was the recorder. I hope you all have a great day.